This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and at numberfire.com, and this is episode 278 of the Late Round Podcast, one of the many shows that are part of the FanDuel Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. We finally got some 2019 data to work off of now that the season's underway. And on today's 10 Trends show, I'll be looking at that data and some of the interesting things that happened in week one to hopefully help you manage your fantasy football squad a little bit better. But before digging in, I just wanted to send a reminder that the weekly NFL free play is back on FanDuel for this year, and it's only for FanDuel Podcast Network listeners. This week, OddApp took down the top prize, netting an all-pro premium subscription at numberfire. They had a Cowboys stack with Dak Prescott and Michael Gallup, and they also got a huge day out of Christian McCaffrey. To enter into the Week 2 contest and win yourself free numberfire premium, tune into Friday's mailbag episode, and I'll give you a link to the free play. So today's first trend is that Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald both played more than 88% of their snaps from the slot. And that's because the Cardinals played a ton of 10 personnel where there are 4 wide receivers on the field at once. According to Graham Barfield of NFL.com, Next Gen Stats had the Cardinals in 10 personnel on 73% of their offensive snaps on Sunday. And then as Graham mentioned on Twitter, no team used 10 personnel on more than 12% of their snaps in 2018. Just to reiterate, the Cardinals used that type of personnel on 73% of their snaps on Sunday. This is the air raid offense. The Cardinals are going to spread teams out, they're going to throw the ball a lot, and then they're going to run at a fast pace as well. That's what we saw in week one. It's really what we expected all offseason, and that's why I wasn't ready to sell the Cardinals offense entering the season. But this is really good news for Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk. We may not see huge target share numbers in that offense because there are so many alternatives on the field at once, but the high volume should make up for it. And Fitz and Kirk are in advantageous slot matchups, which is why I wanted to call out the trend this week. I would call Christian Kirk a buy candidate, but they get Baltimore this week. Don't be surprised, though, if Christian Kirk is a buy on next week's 15 Transactions show. Trend 2 is that Ryan Griffin ran the most routes at tight end in week 1 in the entire league. The routes run data is courtesy of Pro Football Focus, and while I don't think this says you've got to start Ryan Griffin, it does give some hope for Chris Herndon when he returns from suspension. So we'll monitor this situation moving forward, and Ryan Griffin makes for at least a deeper sleeper or a streamer here in week 2. A.J. Brown played 19 fewer snaps than Corey Davis in week 1, but he ran just 3 fewer routes. And then all the while, Brown had a yards per route run rate of 5.6 on Sunday while catching 3 passes. Other Tennessee wide receivers had just 1 reception while netting 5 yards on 45 routes. This is all to say that A.J. Brown was the best Tennessee Titans wide receiver in week 1. My prospect model thought that he was one of the best wide receivers in this entire draft class, if not the best. So it's not all that shocking that he did well. He probably had the most complete profile. I just was really nervous about the landing spot, and I still am, to be honest. But week 1 should make us all feel optimistic about A.J. Brown. And if you drafted Corey Davis, you should be a little bit worried about his production this year, at least from the standpoint of it being consistent. Trend 4 is that on Sunday, Minnesota became the 3rd team since 2010 to win a game while throwing the ball 10 or fewer times. As I talked about consistently this offseason, we saw how the Vikings offense shifted from a play calling standpoint when Kevin Stefanski took over as offensive coordinator. They went from being one of the most pass-friendly offenses when games were close to one of the most run-heavy. And this is going to have an impact on everyone in this offense. We saw Dalvin Cook go off against Atlanta, but if Minnesota has their way with things, Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs are going to suffer from a volume perspective. That's really why I think that they're more inconsistent wide receiver 2s now than borderline wide receiver 1s. A lot of people were drafting Adam Thielen specifically as a borderline wide receiver 1. And for the record, I understand Minnesota saw a nice positive game script in that game against Atlanta. Things will likely be different against Green Bay at Lambeau this weekend. I'm not just completely writing off this passing attack, but I'm noting that this low volume passing attack was by design. The Bengals ran 70 plays on Sunday when over the last 2 seasons, they've averaged less than 59 plays per game. That's consistently been one of the lower marks in the league. The crazy thing, all of those plays in that game on Sunday came in a neutral game script, which means they just went with a pass-heavy approach. Part of that was matchup-based, but that's a good thing. That means the coaching staff in Cincinnati is actually competent. And I'm not just brushing off this John Ross game because of this. the Bengals can end up having a better passing attack than people think. And they've got 3 pretty favorable matchups over the next 4 games. So hooray for not bad coaching. Trend 6 is that Devin Singletary ran the ball on just 8.3% of his rushes on Sunday, which was one of the lowest marks among all relevant running backs. Frank Gore, his teammate, ran it on 57.9% of his snaps played. This really explains the difference between the two players' snap rates and their volume in that game. Singletary played almost 30 more snaps than Frank Gore on Sunday, and TJ Yeldon only played 2. This difference in snaps was pretty big between Singletary and Gore. Yet Gore had 11 rushes versus Singletary's 4. Some of this could be partially due to how this game was going, but this is an awesome sign for Devin Singletary. I know last week I wasn't buying Singletary because of how I thought they'd split this backfield up entering the season. But with new information, you adjust. And I'm adjusting. Singletary might see a bigger workload sooner rather than later. And it was also nice that he saw 6 targets through the air as well. When the peripherals look good, but the volume and production isn't totally there, that's when you've got a buy opportunity. So I actually think that Singletary is a good buy option right now, even though I didn't feature him on yesterday's 15 transaction show. Chris Carson had a freaking 37% target share against Cincinnati on Sunday. The problem is that Brian Schottenheimer still ran a really run-heavy offense. The Seahawks only threw the ball 20 times. And that was in a completely neutral game script. If that's not telling, I don't know what's telling. Brian Schottenheimer wants to run the football. But it is good news for Carson for when the Seahawks are forced to throw the ball more. And that could happen pretty frequently given their upcoming schedule. And for the record, only Chicago and New England targeted their running backs at a higher rate in week 1. And the only reason Chicago is being mentioned is because Tariq Cohen played as a slot receiver against Green Bay. And those targets are being counted as a running back. So it's a plus for Carson overall, but it's still annoying AF that Brian Schottenheimer is running this incredibly run-heavy attack. Trend 8 is that James Conner played 46.6% of Pittsburgh snaps on Sunday night, while Jalen Samuels played 33.3% of them. I didn't mention Conner on this week's 15 transaction show, but I would be buying him all day long. Through 3 quarters against New England, Conner had 13 touches to Jalen Samuels 2. The game just got out of hand and there was no reason to throw Conner out there. That's what we often see from teams in their running back usage when things get out of hand. So buy James Conner and really just buy the whole Steelers offense. The 9th trend is that Darren Waller played every single snap and he had a 30.7% target share on Monday night. And this is really big. This type of usage will make him the late round tight end to break out this year, maybe TJ Hawkinson aside. The Raiders don't really have a ton of pass catching alternatives. Waller's an athletic freak and he's going to be on the field a lot. I was into him entering the year and I'm most definitely into him now after a week of games. This last trend is that only 2.6% of the Rams' targets went to running backs on Sunday, the lowest mark in the league in week 1. And for the record, that includes the Ravens because they did target a fullback against the Dolphins. But this has to be at least a little alarming for those of you with Todd Gurley. He made a living at the goal line and as a receiver in the past under Sean McVay, and his goal line work went to Malcolm Brown, and the Rams didn't target him much out of the backfield against Carolina. If there's one silver lining here, it's that he ran 29 routes according to Pro Football Focus. That was the 9th highest mark in the league. So I would guess that the pass catching usage does come to Gurley eventually, but it's still a pretty important and shocking number to hear after just 1 week. That's going to do it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet to subscribe to the Late Round Podcast, make sure you are pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please do me a favor and leave a rating and review. You can also follow me on Twitter at LateRoundQB. I'll be needing some mailbag questions this week, so definitely hit me up. Thanks, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow with this week's matchup show.